That's right, Bear Down Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you, and the day of reckoning has come. Matt Eberflus out as Chicago Bears head coach after the Thanksgiving Day debacle. We're going to get into everything that's taken place over the last 4 or 5 days. I got plenty on my mind I want to share with everybody, but of course we've got a guest, and we've got a great guest, and none other than the Athletics' Kevin Fishbain. He's going to be by here in just a little bit after I talk about a few things here, because my, oh my, do we have a lot to talk about. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on Thanksgiving. You know, we're talking about 5 days removed at this point, and so much has happened since then. But obviously we need to talk about it because, of course, this was the breaking point, and that is, of course, the complete debacle of a mishandling of the end of a game yet again. And sometimes when you think it can't get worse for Matt Eberflus, like, you really don't think, like, he keeps screwing things up to the point, well, that had to have been the worst one. And then sure enough, he finds a way to really blow it, and blow it on national TV. And not just national TV where, like, you're the Sunday game, the 4:25 game, a Thursday night Amazon Prime game. Those Thanksgiving Day games, and I've talked about this in the past when we're talking about primetime games, not that it matters here, but those Thanksgiving games, like the Bears might be playing at 12:30 on Thursday Eastern time, but that is, in the NFL's eyes, that's equivalent to a primetime game because that has playoff level eyes on it. People watch football on Thanksgiving. I didn't look at the numbers, but you probably had 35 million people watching that Bears-Lions game on Thanksgiving, watching it unfold, people getting into it because the Bears are making a game of it, so people are paying attention at the end of the game, and that happens. And let's just talk about this for a second, the actual handling of the last 35 seconds of the game. Now, with Caleb Williams, what exactly was happening? Did he know they have a timeout? Should he have called a timeout? In the press conference afterwards, he said, look, that's end of the game there, that's the coach's decision. Coach wanted to go without a timeout. We went without a timeout. Some people are arguing that Caleb thought they were out of timeouts, and that's why he audibled. To me, I look at that and go, again, if the timeline is accurate, Caleb got that call about 13 to 15 seconds left on the clock, had to relay it and get the ball snapped. Your best case scenario, he's snapping that with probably 7 or 8 seconds to go. Once he gets the play established to all the players, they run the play quickly and then they try and call a timeout. He's thinking, 1 or 2 seconds, best case scenario. What Caleb Williams doesn't want there is the clock to hit 0 before they could call a timeout on a short, quick play. So he decides to audible and go deep to Rome, which, by the way, if Rome looks over the proper shoulder, he looks inside towards the coverage instead of outside away from the coverage. Caleb was putting that on the back, right shoulder, and Rome thought it was going to go back left towards the coverage. I'm not sure why he did that. Rome turns to the right. He can take a kind of couple steps out a little bit under the ball. That might have been a touchdown. That's how good that throw was, actually, from Caleb Williams. A little wild there. So whether Caleb Williams knew he had a timeout or not, I don't know. You can decide. Caleb, said kind of a couple different things in the post-game press conference. But the bottom line is this. You've got a rookie quarterback. You are the head coach of the football team. You chose to say, let's get a play in, then call a timeout, and then kick the field goal. When truth be told, Caleb was sacked with about 35 seconds to go. You call a timeout. You got a timeout with 31 seconds left on the clock. The Bears can then run a play, gain their 5, 6, 7 yards, whatever they need to do, and then come on to kick a field goal. You're talking about having 22, 23 seconds to kick a field goal. How many times in a regular season game do we see teams on 3rd and 18 complete a pass for 11 yards, then trot, inbounds, then trot the field goal unit out and kick a field goal before the play clock hits 0. It's not that complicated. Now, teams usually have about 30 seconds to get it done. The Bears would have about 22 seconds, 21 seconds to get it done. That is more than enough time. If you have called a timeout, relay to the field goal unit, this is what we're doing. All of you stand here on the sidelines, and when the whistle blows, run your asses out on the field and kick the game-tying field goal. If you have an organized sideline, that's what you're doing. But again, Matt Eberflus doesn't have an organized sideline. The decisions he makes are always the wrong ones. And the players afterwards just snapped. And that was it. Like, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't think Jalen Johnson might have used that expression exactly. Keenan Allen, we think as players we did enough to win the game. Jalen Johnson goes apparently on a tirade after the game, laying into Matt Eberflus for his end-of-game decisions. The players had enough. The players, look, they can look around the locker room and know who's dudes, who can play, who can't play. Like, I understand, you can sit there and be like, hey, he's a good player. We just hope he can contribute to the team. But behind, when they're not talking to the media, like, this guy sucks. Like, players know who can play and who can't play. So when you look around the locker room and you see Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, and you see what Caleb Williams can do, and you see what Rome Odunze can do, and Cole Kmet, he can play, and DeAndre Swift has playmaking abilities, and Montez Sweat can get to the quarterback, and you see Billings is a load, and you see Jalen shutting people down. Like, guys look around the locker room and go, this is a good football team. They know they have a good football team. They know they have talent, and they're sitting at 4-8. And why are they sitting at 4-8? And here's what's amazing about this. Here's really what's amazing about this. Like last year, the blown game to the Broncos, the blown game to the Lions, even the blown game to the Browns. You can't just sit there and go, Matt Eberflus did this, so this happened, and then the Bears lost. Like, it's not one decision, because it was kind of, you could blame Tremaine Edmonds on the missed tackle on Jahmyr Gibbs in the Lions game. And, this was a good play from Jared Goff here. Or, Joe Flacco did this in the Browns game. Or, Russell Wilson hit this guy here. It wasn't a singular decision that caused losses. So when that happens, it can kind of become more of a collective loss. You can put some on Eberflus. You can put some on the players. Certainly the Eberflus critics are going to sit there and be like, he can't win these close games. But you can still sit there if you're Ryan Poles and George McCaskey and Kevin Warren and go, well, that was the team. The team failed there. They needed to execute better. They needed to coach better. Like, you could kind of see how you get there. Now, again, Eberflus should have been fired. I'm sure we'll get into it here at some point. But when the season goes like this, and you can literally, like, you could look at the Colts game and be like, that's a game the Bears could have won if they, like, the way Anthony Richardson played, the Bears shouldn't have lost that game. That game to me kind of fits like the Lions game or the Browns game last year. We're like, that's a game the Bears should have won. But Matt Eberflus, the decisions he makes at the end of games, the Commanders game, the decision to just give 13 free yards where they wouldn't have been able to have the Hail Mary at all, and then they lose. That's what would have happened there. The Bears would have won that game, and Washington would have lost. Suddenly, the Bears aren't 4-8 if that happens. Suddenly, the Bears are 5-7. The game against the Packers, where literally you had time to advance the football and get better in Cairo Santos's range. If you successfully do that, the Bears win that game. The Packers lose that game. Suddenly, the Bears are 6-6. Like, a competent, and this isn't even going into the fact that the Bears quit against the Cardinals and the Patriots. And you could obviously say they could have won those games. And that they lost the Minnesota game, and that was in overtime. And they lost an opportunity to push the Detroit game in overtime. Like, it's not a leap to say that an average coach in the NFL, like, who is an average coach? Sean McDermott of Buffalo? Sean McDermott of Buffalo, if he was the coach of this team, a defensive coach, conservative in a lot of ways coach, if he was the coach of the Bears, is it an easy jump to say they could have been 7-5? I think it's a really easy jump to say this 4-8 team could be 7-5. And I'll be honest, a really good head coach, I think you can say probably splits the Vikings in the Lions game, beats the Packers, beats the Commanders, doesn't quit, have his team quit in those other games, and let's say they split, we'll still give them losses. I'm not saying they'd be undefeated here with a better coach. Let's say they beat the Commanders. All right. That's 5-7 instead of 4-8. Let's say they split with the Cardinals and the Patriots. Okay. That's 6-6 instead of 4-8. And then let's say they beat the Packers. That's 7-5. And then let's say they split with the Vikings in Detroit. That's 8-4. If they had a good head coach, is 8-4 really that far out of the question? I don't think it is. And that's where this becomes the point where finally Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles make the decision that has to be made, because you just can't continue. And I tweeted this, and I really, really believe it. Forget the media and forget the fans. All right? The players. It would have been disrespectful to the players to continue to trot out Matt Eberflus. End of story, bottom line for me there. He was not a leader of this team. And the one thing that's really pissing me off is this culture, right? Ryan Poles, my culture. We've created this culture. Matt Eberflus is a culture creator. We've been getting that jammed down our throats for a couple of years. And then Matt Eberflus gets fired, and literally every player is basically like, yeah, he sucked. And now, like, we need a leader of men as our next coach. I thought that's what Matt Eberflus was. I thought he was the culture creator. Like, what did Matt Eberflus do well? He called some plays defensively well for half a season, 3/4 of a season. What else did the guy do? He didn't create a culture. He can't be the CEO on the sidelines. Like, his defensive coach, he was good. He wasn't great. He did so little. Like, you see player development, you want to give him a hand in that? Let's hope maybe he did something there, because he accomplished so little as head coach of the Bears. We can now sit there and talk about where is he in the all-time pantheon of bad head coaches. I mean, let's think about it. I mean, he is literally the only coach in Bears and Packers history on the other side as well that never beat the rival, ever. He's the only one. So he's got that against him. His career record is abysmal. He's got that against him. You know, John Fox, who's got a terrible record, second worst record in Bears history. Abe Gibron is the worst. He was the coach in the early 70s. John Fox had less talent than this, much less talent. So I'm not putting John Fox there. Mark Trestman, the 2014 Mark Trestman, this is the same year. This is the same year where the Patriots and the Packers put up back-to-back 50 burgers on the Bears. Like, this is the same level of embarrassment with the Commanders loss and the Packers loss and the Lions loss. That it's the same thing. The only thing that happened is the Bears learned from their lesson. George McCaskey let Mark Trestman stay, and the Bears finished with like a 6-game losing streak, and the team quit. The defense didn't even try the rest of that season. And now he learned, all right, we shouldn't just play out the string with the head coach. They learn from their lesson and actually fire a head coach in mid-season, because they're hopefully learning and improving and getting better as a franchise, which is crazy to say. It's like a second grader learning his math, but that's where we are with this franchise. So when you look at how bad Matt Eberflus was, then you sit there and go, well, who is to blame for Matt Eberflus? And we're going to get into Ryan Poles here in a little bit, because I think that's a very complicated question that we need to answer here before we get to Kevin Fishbain. So let me comment on the Friday morning press conference / then he gets fired. I think this is much ado about nothing. Like, it was Matt Eberflus had a job. Matt Eberflus's job was to meet the media on the morning after the game. He did. It was 10 minutes. You could tell he didn't want to be there. He looked depressed. They didn't even ask him that much stuff. He knew he blew it. Like, they knew what the situation was. Here's the thing, if they postponed the press conference, basically that is just showing that Matt Eberflus is going to get fired. And Kevin Warren's trying to say we wanted him to be able to tell his family and all this stuff before it went crazy on the internet and with the media. Like, they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now, the right thing to do would have been to have an overnight meeting with George McCaskey and fire him at like 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning before this thing. Then they can postpone that and say, well, they got to get their ducks in a row. But again, it's obligated media. So this is what the Bears do. When the Bears have media obligations, they make major announcements after those media obligations. And they force the coach or the GM or whoever to just sit there and be like, well, we're looking at all options. We don't know what we're doing. You know, Shane Waldron, same thing. Matt Eberflus, we're looking at all the options. Next day, Shane Waldron gets fired. You know, I remember that happening with like Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. We're looking at the coaching staff. We're examining everything. And then that's it. They don't have to talk to the media again for a while. Then afterwards, they fire Mark Helfrich and the other coaches. Like, this is just how the Bears operate. So they don't want to deal with a media obligation. They want to buy some time. So they throw Matt Eberflus out there to the Wolves. He knows, maybe he knew he was going to get fired. Who knows? It doesn't matter. Why are we that worried about 9 minutes of Matt Eberflus's life after the misery that he led the Bears down for 3 years? I just don't care. I'm sorry. Why do we care this much? I don't care. The man's going to get paid for 2.5 years coaching the Bears that he's not doing his job because he got fired because he's bad at it. So he had to talk to the media for 9 minutes and say, as far as I know, I'm coaching against the Niners. Great. Then he found out he wasn't. Oh, well, it happens. I really don't think this is like, to me, this is like the Chicago media and fans. Like, we just want to assume the Bears screw up, so we're going to bitch about the Chicago Bears. And we're like, oh, we hate Matt Eberflus, but damn it, he couldn't have talked to the media for 9 minutes. That was unfair. Who cares? Really? That's what we're going to worry about? So I'm not concerned about Matt Eberflus's press conference. I don't think anyone else should be. And that is going to be such a footnote on the story of the 2024 Chicago Bears and the disaster that's this season has been. Because like I said, these players, they look at this and they knew that what kind of roster they had. And they knew that Matt Eberflus was just dragging them down. And that's a really hard situation to be in. But I'll say this, the players really seem to be rallying around Thomas Brown. Even before he was promoted to head coach, the offensive players really seem to like him. So we're going to see where this goes. Now, here's what I will say about Thomas Brown. And I said this last week on Bears Banter. I thought the move was to make Thomas Brown the interim head coach. And they've done that. Excellent. Good choice. And I hear some people saying Thomas Brown should have just stayed the offensive coordinator. Now he's going to have more to do. He won't be able to have as much time with Caleb. He's going to have plenty of time with Caleb. He's still going to be calling plays. He's still going to be doing a lot of the offensive scheming. That's all still going to happen. Like, will he have maybe a little less time? Maybe. But let's talk about Caleb Williams in the big picture. That's what we need to talk about here. The big picture with Caleb Williams is you need to make sure you have the right head coach for him. That is absolutely the number one top priority there. So when you've got that priority as number one, and now you're going to ask yourself, if you're Ryan Poles, who are we going to interview in January? Who are some of the candidates? We're going to want to do Ben Johnson, maybe Joe Brady, maybe Mike Vrabel, whatever. He's already starting to noodle together his list of candidates. Is Thomas Brown on that list? Yes. Is Washington on that list? No. Is Hightower on that list? No. So it would have been a very Bears thing to do to just promote Richard Hightower to the head coach and then because Thomas Brown needs to focus on Caleb Williams, then interview Thomas Brown for the head coach position. You could have seen if he could handle the job, and then you didn't. Like, that would have been the Bears' decision. So I don't know why people are just like, that should have been what they were doing. All right, because they're the Bears and they make the wrong decisions usually? No, the right decision here is Thomas Brown going to get an interview with Ryan Poles after the season? If the answer is yes, then you make him the interim head coach and see if he can handle it. Now, personally, while I say that was the right move, I don't think Thomas Brown is going to be able to handle it. This guy was a passing game coordinator a month ago and is now the head coach of an NFL football team. Now, everyone I talk to in league circles says Thomas Brown's the real deal. People love Thomas Brown. This guy's going places. This guy's going to be a head coach. You hear Mike Tomlin light about the offensive version of Mike Tomlin. You hear that a lot. But again, is it too soon for Thomas Brown? I mean, let's be honest here. He wasn't a miracle worker last year in Carolina. I'm not blaming him for it. But Bryce Young looking pretty good now, and Bryce Young did not look pretty good last year under Thomas Brown. I'm not blaming him, but I'm just saying when you have to look at this, you need to look at everything. Now, Thomas Brown has improved the offense immensely with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, his EPA per play, CPOE composite, like if you like to look at that kind of stuff, the last 3 weeks of Shane Waldron's tenure, 32nd out of 33 in those advanced analytics. Like, it was awful. We all saw it. The offense was abysmal. And with Thomas Brown, EPA per play is now 12th, and the composite is 18th. So what are we talking about with Caleb Williams? Thomas Brown has elevated Caleb Williams and the offense to NFL league average. That's what he's done. Now, compared to where it was, we got a low bar, as Jeff Berkus says. The bar is on the floor. We just have to step over it. Thomas Brown stepped over Shane Waldron's bar. Congratulations. But right now, we are not seeing the 1999 Rams or the 2008 Patriots offense. We are not seeing this team, the Lions, Ben Johnson's offense. We're not seeing 33 points a game, 34 points a game, 425 yards of offense. We're not seeing that right now. They still can't run the football. They actually have gotten worse running the football since Thomas Brown has taken over. And again, I'm not ripping the guy, but I'm saying let's look at this with an objective eye. Thomas Brown, if you forget how bad Shane Waldron was, Thomas Brown has been pretty good. That's what he's been, pretty good. But because the bar was so low, pretty good seems like a home run, grand slam, everything rolled up into one. He's the greatest coach we've ever seen. But we can't look at this way. We've got to be objective. Thomas Brown needs to win some football games. I don't care what the Bears' schedule looks like. You go beat the Niners. They're terrible. Go beat the 49ers this week. Go beat Seattle. Show me something. Win a game or two in the division. Do something. You got 5 games left. Let me see you go 3-2. You go 3-2, and Caleb Williams and the offense look borderline top 10. We can talk about Thomas Brown becoming the head coach. But if the Bears go 1-4, if the Bears maybe even go 2-3, and the offense, they still can't run the football, and Caleb looks good but not better, and their offense is 13, 14, 15, 16 in the league. Like, let's not sit there and just crown Thomas Brown and say we got to keep it in place because we need the Caleb Williams stability. I've been screaming for stability around Caleb Williams longer than anybody. But sometimes you just have to sit there and go, it didn't work. We're going to be better off starting over. Now, starting over with someone, me, I'm going to be sitting here honking for Ben Johnson for, several weeks. That's just how it's going to be here. You're going to listen to this podcast, you're going to hear about Ben Johnson. That's the right move. If Ben Johnson isn't the move, I don't know what the right move is. That's where I am right now. I don't think there's a number 2 candidate right now that you can sit there and be like, that's the guy. That's the guy if it's not Ben Johnson. I don't think there's a guy like that. Mike Vrabel? I don't want Mike Vrabel. I don't think the Bears want Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel, he's a hard ass. He's going to, treat players like they're kids. It doesn't last very long with Mike Vrabel. He can create a culture. He can win some football games. But go look at Mike Vrabel's offense. 1 year with Arthur Smith and Ryan Tannehill looked like a miracle. Other than that, Matt LaFleur was his offensive coordinator, and the offense was like bottom 5 in the league. All right? Like, Mike Vrabel is not the guy for Caleb Williams. And I can't believe people actually think that's the right way to go. So let's see what happens here. They're going to get a free look at Thomas Brown for the next 5 games and see what he can do. And then they're going to have their full coaching search and go from there. The Ben Johnson thing's going to be tricky because Ben Johnson is going to be in the Super Bowl probably, or at least the NFC Championship game. That's going to, they got the new rules with how they interview people, but that's going to make things a little complicated there for the Chicago Bears. So let's wrap up here with talking about Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles in that press conference. And the one thing I took away from that press conference is that this is Kevin Warren's football team. George McCaskey was at the press conference, but he was off in the corner hiding. It's not George McCaskey's football team, even if his name's on it as chairman. It's not Ryan Poles' football team. It's Kevin Warren's football team. Now, again, Ryan Poles, I do think Ryan Poles is going to be leading this head coaching search. But Kevin Warren's going to be on these interviews, and Kevin Warren is going to have significant input. And just because Kevin Warren can't break down Ben Johnson's offensive scheme does not mean that Kevin Warren isn't a football guy and knows attributes and what needs to be done and who needs to be in place for the Chicago Bears, like who would be a good head coach. I have confidence in Kevin Warren. Now, nobody else does. I tweet out that I think Kevin Warren it's good that he's involved. And people are like, what are you talking about? He sucks. He's done nothing. All right. Let's talk about Kevin Warren for a second. Big Ten commissioner, he botched the COVID response. Now, I do think it's funny on this COVID response and how Kevin Warren blew it, that he postponed fall sports for college athletics in the fall of 2020. Why? Because he didn't want kids to die. That's where he was. You know, the professional leagues were putting together very strict protocols on how they were going to go forward, and he didn't think they could do the same things on college campuses. And he didn't think he could trust 19-year-olds to handle things the same way 26-year-olds would in professionals. So he postponed the fall. He was going to put it in the spring or summer, whatever he was going to do. And of course, everyone revolted. Justin Fields, Ohio State, you're ruining life. And the SEC gave him the middle finger and said, we're playing football. And don't think politics and where these leagues are located didn't play into it. But the SEC says we're going to play. And then eventually the Big Ten crumbled and put together the mediocre, whatever season you want to call it, whatever that was, that mess of a season in 2020. So I'll admit, Kevin Warren blew it. Now, at the same time, I'm just going to say to some fans out there, and you know who you are, you're mad that Kevin Warren blew the COVID response in 2020, but you voted for the guy in 2024 who also blew the national COVID response in 2020. So don't talk out of both sides of your mouth. But Kevin Warren didn't want kids to die. So he decides to try and postpone the season. Everything gets blown up in his face. He backtracks. They play a bad season. All right, let's put that aside. Kevin Warren also set up the Big Ten as the worst commissioner in Big Ten history that everyone keeps telling me. Kevin Warren got the LA market in the Big Ten, basically destroyed the Pac-12. I know he had that little pact with the Pac-12 because the SEC was eating all the teams. So him and the Big 12 and the Pac-12 made a little pact. Then he basically stabbed the Pac-12 in the back and got USC and UCLA because he saw the writing on the wall. Cutthroat from Kevin Warren. And I'm okay with cutthroat if you need to be cutthroat. He's not just this Zen Buddhist, meditate at 6 a.m. kind of guy. Like, he saw a business decision that needed to be made. He went out and got USC, UCLA, totally revamped the Big Ten, murdered the Pac-12, and the Big Ten is now the number 2 conference behind the SEC and is fully stable and able to handle the changes that are happening in the college athletics. Secured a massive television deal, and now every school in the Big Ten is making hundreds of millions of dollars a year thanks to that thing. So are they really upset at Kevin Warren for what he did as the Big Ten commissioner, or did they not like how he handled certain things because he's going to do what he wants to do? Now, fast forward to him as president. Everyone's like, he's blown it with the stadium. Did Kevin Warren buy the property in Arlington Heights? No, he wasn't part of this organization then. Ted Phillips did. That was Ted Phillips's idea. The same guy that blew the stadium to rebuild a Soldier Field. We all hate it. We know it sucks. The Bears know it sucks. That's why 20 years later, they're trying to get a new stadium because they got the smallest capacity of a stadium in the NFL. They don't have enough skyboxes. It looks ugly. They blew it. Ted Phillips blew it. His crowning achievement sucks. So then he goes and buys Arlington Heights property, doesn't have anything sorted out with the taxes. It's a complete mess. And Kevin Warren then takes over and inherits this mess. And Kevin Warren's like, are we sure we want to go to Arlington Heights? Maybe we can work something out with Chicago. And the Bears are like, well, we can't. Ted Phillips couldn't. And Kevin Warren's like, give me a chance here. Let's see what we can do. Kevin Warren starts working with the mayor. Kevin Warren still has the property in Arlington Heights. He's leveraging both places against each other, trying to get the Bears the best deal. But did the shovel need to be in the ground 3 months after Kevin Warren started? I've said all along, I thought 2025 was going to be the target year in terms of starting to make things happen with this. This is a waiting game. He is trying to leverage Arlington Heights and Chicago against each other, trying to get the best deal, trying to get the most revenue for the Bears, trying to get the most, money kicked in, because the Bears are broke. We know it. They don't have a lot of money. The Bears don't just have $3 billion sitting around and just build a stadium and hotels and everything. They don't have that kind of capital. They'd have to sell off like half the team to do that. So Kevin Warren's trying to make the best deal possible for the Chicago Bears. That's going to take a while. So I'm not sure why everyone thinks Kevin Warren is some failure as president, because this is taking a while on the stadium. He did a complete restructure of the Bears organization. Like, executives were handling jobs for the Bears that like 3 people would do with another team. He restructured it. He promoted people. He brought in new people. He completely restructured the executive branch of the Chicago Bears in terms of job responsibilities and having people with less job responsibilities so they can do it better and do more. He brought in Ted Cruz, who's one of the best communications guys in the NFL, and worked with Patrick Mahomes and knows what it takes to have a superstar quarterback. And he says, we're going to have Caleb Williams. We need a guy who knows what he's doing. Like, he's done so many positives. Media relations with the Bears, so much better than they used to be. You're seeing all these Bears. Jalen Johnson has a show. DJ Moore has a show. Mercedes Lewis has a show. Why? Because the Bears aren't telling Cole Kmet has a show. They're not telling these guys that they can't do media. That's all they did for a decade. Oh, don't talk to the media. Don't talk to the media. The media is evil. Kevin Warren's changing that. There's a much better relationship with the media and the players with the media than there was. Your Bears fans bitching for years about how they can't even take videos at training camp and everything sucks and the Bears are terrible to the fans and terrible to the media. Kevin Warren's trying to improve that. Even simple things like making the food really good food in the media press box, so the media isn't just bitching about it on social media. Like, changing the perspective of the Bears, that they aren't this cheap mom and pop organization and that they're a world-class organization. Like, what is wrong? You tweet at me at Bill T. Zimmerman. Tell me why Kevin Warren sucks. And Kevin Warren's going to be involved in the football coach, where he knows nothing about football. Really? Have you talked to Kevin Warren? I'm not saying he has, knows everything ins and outs and the proper way to lock, peek, shed for defensive linemen in terms of how to get past their offensive linemen and get into the backfield. But have you talked to Kevin Warren? Do you know for a fact that the guy who was with the Rams in the 90s, the Vikings for 15 years, Big Ten commissioner, in 25 years, he's absorbed nothing because he wasn't a general manager or a scout? That's what the rules are. We had Ted Phillips. It was like the worst president any team has ever seen. And now Kevin Warren isn't doing things on your timeline, so you think he sucks? Kevin Warren may not be phenomenal. He may suck, but a year and a half in, there's no judgment on Kevin Warren at this point. That is a seriously long process. Let's see what happens with the stadium. Let's see what happens with the coaching hire. You guys are all quick to jump on Kevin Warren. And I'm just saying, let's see what happens, because this is what we all wanted. We screamed about it for a decade. The Bears need a team president that can hold football operations accountable. They hire a team president that can hold football operations accountable. And now it's too involved. We need to go back to the 10. Are you kidding me? Just go bugger up a tree. All right. So let's talk about Ryan Poles here as we wrap up. I've been going way too long. Kevin's ready to go here. So let's talk about this really quick. Ryan Poles. Now, I will say this. I think Ryan Poles staying is the right decision. And clearly, Kevin Warren made it very clear. Ryan Poles isn't going anywhere. I would be far more concerned of bringing in a new general manager and a new head coach and have that kind of instability for Caleb Williams in year 2. Because then the new GM comes in and goes, well, I don't really like DJ Moore. I don't really like Cole Kmet. And they got to finish out their contracts. They're trying to replace them. It gets very destabilizing very quickly when you're like, look what happened to Justin Fields. Basically the same thing is what you'd be doing. Justin Fields was with a mediocre team in 2021. When Ryan Poles comes in, blows it up around him in 2022, then says, figure it out in 2023. He couldn't. He's gone. Caleb Williams in 2024. We don't need to do that again to another quarterback. So at least keep the general manager in place. Let him bring in the coach and let's see what happens. Because here's the thing with Ryan Poles. You can't fire him after the Panthers trade. And some people sit there and say that Panthers trade gets too much credit, and maybe it does. But other people will look at it and say, well, that Panthers trade was so good, it does deserve a lot of credit. So I did just a really quick, breakdown of Ryan Poles' resume. And basically, you can have a plus, a double plus, and a triple plus. You can have a 0, and then negative, double negative, triple negative. That's how I looked at this. And when you look at this, you're looking at draft picks, position, where they were drafted, and how good they are. And some guys, it's still a development in process, so this is just a guess, or this is where they are right now. And then the same thing with free agency and some of those trades. What kind of impact did they have on the team? And where they were drafted, or how much money you spent on them, also matters. So I'm going to go through this really quick. Kyler Gordon, single plus. Nickel corner in the second round should hit. It did hit. Good. Jaquan Brisker, same thing, like a nickel corner. Safety in round 2 should hit. It did hit, single plus. Velus, just a you could argue a double negative. I gave him 1. Third round, no guarantee a third round pick was going to hit. It missed. Braxton Jones, double plus. 5th round, you get a starting tackle out of the 5th round. Well done. Dom Rob, single minus. Darnell Wright, single plus. It was the 10th overall pick. Javon Dexter, single plus. Playing nice for his 2nd round pick. Tyreek Stevenson, 0, because he is going the wrong direction right now. Zach Pickens is a minus. Roshan, I gave a 0, because I think he's pretty good for a 4th round back. He's not spectacular. That's about what you expect. Tyler Scott, one negative. Noah Sewell, 1 negative. Terrell Smith, 1 positive. Caleb Williams, I only did a single positive right now. I expect that to be a double plus or a triple plus, but to be fair, single plus. Roma Dunze, I did a single plus. Amagaji, Taylor, and Booker, I all did 0s. I'm not going to call them negatives. I'm not going to call them positive. Like Torrey Taylor, you need him to be spectacular using a 4th round pick on a punter. He's not that right now. He's inconsistent. If Torrey Taylor was anything, he'd be a minus right now, but I'm going to give him a 0. Then you look at the free agent acquisitions and trades. Kevin Byard, single plus. TJ Edwards, single plus. It's a linebacker. It's not that hard to find linebackers. Tremaine Edmonds, 0, because the contract was so high. DeMarcus Walker, single plus. Montez Sweat, double plus. Billings, a single plus. Could argue a double plus. I went single plus there because of the injury. Nate Davis, I gave a double negative. $30 million. They got out of it after a year and a half. It wasn't a crippling contract. Chase Claypool, triple negative. He did nothing for the team. They lit the 32nd pick of the draft on fire. Tanyan and Everett both get single negatives. DeAndre Swift is 0. Keenan Allen is 0. DJ Moore, I gave a double plus, probably because I hadn't given double pluses in other spots. Lucas Packer, a single negative. PJ Walker, a single negative. Basically, when it comes down to, he's +4 in the draft. He's -1 with free agency and trades, +3 overall. That's not a phenomenal resume by any means for Ryan Poles, but it's pretty good. It's okay. It's a fine place to start. And if he learned his lesson from guys like Chase Claypool, then maybe we move forward. But you have to look at everything with Ryan Poles. And Ryan Poles has made some mistakes. Chase Claypool and Nate Davis are at the top of the list. Robert Tanyan, Gerald Everett, a lot of the other mistakes, they're not hurting that much. Noah Sewell, no one's crying that Noah Sewell's nothing. It happens. So luckily, other than Chase Claypool, there haven't been crippling mistakes from Ryan Poles. So Ryan Poles is fine. And I think the fact that he did make the trade that brought in a potential superstar in Caleb Williams keeps him safe. So that's kind of where we are. I've been going 40 minutes on this. There was a lot to talk about. So let's get to Kevin Fishbain. He joins me next. This is Bill Zimmerman, Bears Banter. We'll be right back. Welcome back into the podcast. Excited to talk to this guy. He always brings his fun nuggets wherever he travels, and he's always got a lot of opinions and a lot of information. He is Kevin Fishbain of The Athletic, periodically on Hogan John's podcast as well, and he joins me now. Kevin, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and let's dive into this here. The last 5 days or so for you had to have been quite the roller coaster. from the Thursday debacle with the timeout to Friday morning with the Eberflus presser, and then of course letting him go afterwards. So I guess where we could start in 8,000 different places, let me start with this one. And that is the fact that the Bears made a coaching change in the middle of the season, something that a lot of people just continually dismiss, said, well, the Bears aren't going to do that because they never do that. Is that just something where you say, well, that had to be done and it was done? Or do you think that actually signifies significant change at Hallis Hall?
Today I'll tell you that had to be done. I'm curious to see who the next head coach is, how the search goes, what other changes we see in the building moving forward before I think this is anything kind of systemic. This was just, it had become an untenable situation. You can look back to, probably the closest, Nagy, there was kind of a moment, and I do wonder if they'd gotten blown out on Thanksgiving in 2021, if they would have done it. There was Trestman after the loss to the Packers and how bad that season went. But what was different about those two teams is the 2014 team was terrible. And it obviously wasn't supposed to be, but it turned out to be terrible. And you knew that a rebuilding project was coming. The 2021 team was terrible, and you knew that a rebuild was coming. This is different. So I think that maybe it was easier those years, and I'm just using those years as examples because those are teams I covered. I didn't cover, Giron or Wani or Lovey. Maybe this year provided a different situation because you don't want to play out the string in the last month when you think that you could be good next year. Like when you think you have a nucleus, if you're worried that the current coaching setup is hampering that and preventing Caleb Williams and other young players from winning games and learning to win and all that stuff, then I think you just kind of had to do it. I think that's kind of what made this time maybe a little different.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was thinking, how much of the Caleb Williams development impediment played into that, because you brought up the 2014 Trestman team, and I do agree, especially on defense, that just there was just no talent anywhere on that defense. It was and a terrible scheme, Mel Tucker, the whole thing. But I do look at it in terms of how the players were interacting with the coach. There seemed to be a disconnect there in 2014. There were fights in the locker room, and the coach was nowhere to be found. All the issues that have surfaced from 2014. And now with this, we hear about, Jalen Johnson going off in the locker room, Keenan Allen publicly. I think we did enough as players to win the game. Clearly there was something going on. There was a lot brewing between the players and this coaching staff, or at least the head coach. And to me, that's where I kind of drew similarities from Trestman's last year to this year with Eberflus, where maybe Hallis Hall has learned its lesson, where they played it out with Trestman and lost 5 or 6 games to finish the year that year, versus this year you got 5 games left, and let's actually see if we can breathe some life back into the team.
Yeah, and I think there was also a open door with the Thomas Brown effect, right? Like you bring in this, you would promote this guy to be offensive coordinator. You see the success Caleb Williams and the offense has had on the field. You see the way players are responding to his style, which is obviously very different than Matt Eberflus. And you have kind of this behind door number 2 option. Like they didn't have that. The irony of the Trestman year, not to go down the rabbit hole, but the guy who would have been the interim head coach would have been Aaron Kromer until the Aaron Kromer incident happened, when he was caught leaking info about Jay Cutler to a reporter. And then they were stuck because you couldn't have Mel Tucker be the interim head coach. So this team had a very obvious option in terms of Thomas Brown, and somebody who's going to be a head coach one day. I don't know where or when, but we can get into that. But yeah, I think, I will say this. Obviously, players were frustrated. Obviously, there was a bit of a disconnect between Eberflus and the players, and they were public about their disagreements with some of his calls for weeks. What did seem different is, from what I've gathered, there was no quit. We've seen Bears teams in which guys just stopped playing, stopped putting in effort, and just didn't care. Now, would that have I was pretty impressed with how they came out at halftime after how things started.
True.
Uh, and for a second, I was thinking to myself, this is going to be so Bears that we're going to hear about how they battled the adversity to come back and almost lose. The adversity that, by the way, they created, and that shows something to the head coach. But I do think it's worth noting that these guys, especially the last 3 weeks, they've hung in these games. And look, maybe that's a testament to Thomas Brown. But yeah, I think that you've got it definitely does compare to 2014 in terms of how much guys are talking. And Trestman and Eberflus I mean, I've heard people kind of joke that Matt Eberflus is like defensive Mark Trestman. That he has all these, great ideas and just loves to teach and loves to coach. But when it comes to being the CEO and really leading players, that just isn't his strong suit. And we certainly saw both their tenures end in similar fashions.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you one thing about Matt Eberflus, and then I want to get into Thomas Brown and Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles here as we continue forward here on the podcast. So with Eberflus, and again, I know with you have an egregious issue with not calling a timeout on Thanksgiving where you got 35 million people watching, and we know George doesn't like to be embarrassed. So I know obviously that had something to play into it, but with the games blown in 2023, like the Lions game and the Broncos game with the 98% win probability or whatever, with those, it was like, they couldn't hold on to the lead, but you couldn't point to one single thing. You could have said, oh, well, maybe he should have kicked the field goal on the 4th and 2 or whatever it is against Denver, or maybe he should have given the ball to Justin Fields. You can come up with these theoretical things they could have done better as a team, execution, coaching, whatever it was. But with some of these decisions here, and I can't come up with a coach or a team that had specific instances like this where you can point to it and say, if they cover the sidelines on the second to last play against Washington, they probably never have the Hail Mary. If they advance the football against Green Bay and utilize those last 30 seconds, Santos has a better field goal. Like there's so much like if this, then this in terms of potential wins where and maybe you can think of an example because I can't. A coach of a 4-8 team where literally you can sit there and say, if maybe like 3 decisions are different, perhaps this team is as good as 7-5.
Yeah, it's really mind-boggling. And before the season, when I would kind of talk about the team and where things stood, I always said my 2 biggest question marks. Well, you had question marks about the offensive line and the pass rush. I think those were the personnel question marks. And Caleb was like this. I didn't want to count him there because obviously it's a rookie quarterback. You're going to have ups and downs. My biggest question marks really were the head coach and the play caller. Because I didn't really know what Shane Waldron was going to be. I just had no idea. I couldn't sit there and point. I did not sit there and point to Seattle and be like, oh, this is going to work out well. I just don't think he had enough proof from Seattle to think that this was going to work. And my other big question about Matt Eberflus was, what's this guy going to look like? A, now that he has the talent, and B, now that he's going to be in a lot of close games. And we saw the answer to that as you kind of laid out. Because I just didn't know. Because as you said, you go back through his first 2 years and you don't have a ton of examples where it's like Eberflus's decision is what really made the difference. You mentioned Denver. I was looking back at that recently, trying to remember kind of how that game all unfolded. And yeah, that was the big one. And yeah, you pointed to the coach when they blew those leads. And I think Ryan Poles actually alluded to some of those games yesterday. But to me, when I saw those blown leads, I thought that was almost more of a organizational issue. Like this is just an organization that just still hasn't figured out how to win games. But yeah, this year, I mean, you can point to the exact decisions in game management where, and I thought Thursday was, it's almost like the exclamation mark because it's almost like an Eddie Eberflus short-circuited. Like, just like the idea of him, freezing, and obviously we've seen all the memes and stuff, but it was almost like as that clock was winding and he's watching this go on, that he just froze. And he's at all these moments where these decisions have gone wrong. And look, in reality, these are 50-50 shots. Like, yes, he should have had a better play call in the second to last play in Washington. Yes, he should have called the timeout before the Hail Mary. that was still a 1 in 1,000 throw and tip and catch. Yes, he should have moved the ball against Green Bay. That ball was still centimeters away from missing the hand of Carl Brooks and going through the uprights. So you have these. It's such a difficult situation, but in the end, it's a results-driven business, and you are what your record is. And the Bears' record is 4-8, and you can specifically point to his decisions leading to that. So, yeah, I couldn't think of it. Nagy had a few moments. Like, I mean, you talk about the Eddie Pinheiro kick against the Chargers. I remember 2018 when they lost in New York to the Giants. That was kind of the first eye-opening, like, oh boy, moment that we kind of forgot about because they finished the season strong. But that Giants game turned out to kind of be a bit of a alert, a little bit of red flag that there was some kind of coaching question marks. But yeah, in terms of this many in a row, I mean, I can't think of anything like this.
Yeah, it really. Sometimes you say only the Bears, yeah, only the Bears. But let me ask you about Thomas Brown. Obviously, I think that was the right call. I know there was some pushback, some people saying, "Oh, just have him focus on Caleb Williams and give it to Hightower or someone else." But to me, if I'm Ryan Poles and I'm leading this coaching search, I sit there and say, is Thomas Brown going to be getting an interview from us in January to potentially be the head coach? If the answer is yes, which I think clearly it is, then how do you miss an opportunity to give him a 5-week tryout and see how he can handle the job? I think it may not work out here, and I'm fine with that. But I think that's a missed opportunity there. So I thought it made a lot of sense to do this. In terms of Thomas Brown offensively, obviously a lot of improvement from what the last 3 weeks of Shane Waldron's tenure was. But at the same time, I would sit here and say that they're not running the football well at all with Thomas Brown. The offense has basically been league average, which is significantly better than basically the worst in the league, which is what it was prior to that. So I see the improvement, but at the same time, Jeff Berkus from Windy City Gridiron says the bar is on the floor and we stepped over it. And that kind of feels like where the offense is, where we're seeing massive improvement, but it's only massive improvement to league average. And I don't think that's where you want this ceiling to be. So I think while it's important to see how Thomas Brown can lead and how he does as the sideline CEO, I think the offense, while it's improved a lot the last 3 weeks, still needs to show significant improvement, even with the tough games up ahead, significant improvement over the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, shoot, this team, if it wasn't for like a desperation drive at the end of the first half, they would have had 0 first downs in the first half in Detroit. I mean, it was horrible. And you look at Caleb Williams still taking too many sacks. As you said, the run game's not there. I'm still waiting. Like how many highlights of Roma Dunze making big catches down the sideline at Washington do we see? And like, where is that in the offense? Like that guy should be exploding off the field, and he certainly is able to. Not to take away from what DJ Moore and Keenan Allen have done the past couple of weeks, but yeah, there's some improvement on offense to come, and you want to see that. They're going to want to see how he kind of commands the room. And one thing, I mean, you can learn from Thomas Brown a lot over the next 5 weeks that have nothing to do with Thomas Brown potentially being the next head coach, because you can say what you like and don't like about how he runs a team and kind of write that down for your head coaching search. You can see what you like and don't like about how he works with Caleb Williams, his X's and O's, his scheme, how he's putting Caleb Williams in the best position to succeed. Does that line up with how Liam Cohen would put him in position to succeed? A Cliff Kingsbury, so you could look at the X's and O's side and how he's commanding the room, all that stuff. So I do get the decision. Interestingly, Bill, if they fired Matt Eberflus and Shane, like let's say they fired both of them after the Patriots game, which I think you could have I don't think the Bears ever would have done it. But you certainly could have made the argument after the way those 3 games went from Washington to Arizona, New England. I believe if they had done that Richard Hightower would have been the head coach. Because remember, you didn't have any qualms about special teams up until the blocked field goal. And Richard Hightower is somebody who, because of the nature of special teams coordinators, it's going to be very difficult for him to get a head coaching job. Not anything to do with him, just because that's just the way the league is. But I know he's very well respected in that building. And when you talk about game management and all this stuff that head coach has to do. The special teams coordinator is familiar with that stuff, and he also has to present in front of the whole team a lot. So if they had done that then, it probably would have been high time. They would have moved Brown to play caller if you'd fired Shane Waldron, and you probably would have high time as a head coach. Obviously, it didn't happen. You've seen the way the players have reacted to Thomas Brown's leadership the last 3 weeks. You see positives there, and I thought you hit it too, because whether I would wager that in 2025 or 2026, barring some like spectacular collapse of something he has overseen, Thomas Brown will be a head coach in the NFL.
I agree with that.
Because we're talking about in the next 2 years, there's going to be what, 12 to 15 openings? And to think that he wouldn't be considered for one of those, assuming things continue to go well on offense, he's going to get one. So the Bears are going to, have a crack at getting this interview, but so is everybody else in the league. They're going to be watching it. So it does make a lot of sense. And I like what he said yesterday, which is like, he's not going to micromanage. He's going to just, he's going to want it. Now, that could come back to bite him, because if the defense is struggling or the special teams makes mistakes, he's the head coach now. So he's got to answer to that stuff. So he's got to make sure he knows what's going on. But I do think that like the number one, number two, and number three most important things that the Bears can accomplish over the next 5 weeks is Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams. Like that's all that matters to me is Caleb Williams finishing the season with arrow up. I've said this a bunch of times, and I apologize for not coming up with something more original for your podcast, Bill, but this is what I've been saying for months. If you're a Bears fan on January 8th, you want to feel about Caleb Williams the way Texans fans felt about CJ Stroud last January. Now, that's ignoring the way Stroud has played this year, but just that feeling where like every Texans fan was like, we got him. Here we go. This is going to set us on a Super Bowl path one day. You want to feel that way about Caleb Williams. And so to me, like, yes, you're kind of looking, this is a bit of an extended interview for Thomas Brown. Yes, you can learn a lot about his coaching style and his leadership and all those things. But the most important thing that the Bears can get out of him is what he can do for Caleb Williams, because in the end, you need to know that Caleb Williams is the guy. I think he is. But you still want to see more. You still want to see more from him, especially these late game situations. Like, right, he's made these really incredible fourth quarter drives. And he had the error in overtime against Minnesota. He probably should have been more aware of the clock. Obviously, at the end of the Detroit game, he didn't get help from his coach, but I think he had a mistake there too. You want to see him keep improving, because that is really all that matters for this team moving into 2025.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So before we wrap up, let me ask you about Kevin Warren, Ryan Poles, the press conference on Monday. A lot of people were making a lot about that. And let me ask you, before I ask you about the press conference, I guess, let me ask you about Kevin Warren as someone who's at Hallis Hall regularly and maybe seen some of the changes internally, or maybe there haven't been that many changes internally over what you've seen over your years covering the team. Because I know there was a pretty large management restructure. People got different titles. He brought in new people. Ted Cruz is the one that got more, public notice than a lot of the other ones. I know even little things like trying to improve the food in the press box and things like that, maybe improve the relationship with the media. And obviously the stadium is the big thing, and everyone's like, well, there's been no movement on the stadium and all this. And to me, I was like, well, he didn't purchase the Arlington Heights. That was a Ted Phillips and George decision, and now he's kind of navigating through that. To me, this was always going to be a slow process. And I know obviously we haven't gotten there, but I always kind of thought 2025 was going to be the year where we really start seeing some significant movement there. So Kevin Warren's, year and a half, whatever it's been as president, what have you seen, positives or negatives, around Hallis Hall in terms of, his fingerprints on the Bears?
Yeah, well, I was trying to think of a good joke about, can he buy my support with the press box food? Because the press box food is definitely improved, and that was something that he aimed to do. Look, there have been changes in the building that have been for the better, but I look at I'll point to three things that I think are objective that you don't need to talk to sources to see. Since Kevin Warren took over, the football team is 11-18 and had to fire their coach in the middle of the season. Since Kevin Warren took over, they've looked at least 3 different stadium sites and are nowhere near where they need to be to build a stadium. And to the Arlington Heights point, I think regardless of what anybody feels about that site or what a stadium would look like there or the viability of that, the fact of the matter is they would be in the middle of building a stadium right now. I shouldn't say fact of the matter, most likely would be in the process of building a stadium there. Had they been continuing along that path, and they're not, and things in Chicago have stalled. So that's number 2. And number 3, I think the outward perception of the team is not any better. If anything, it might even be worse since Warren took over. So if you look at those 3 things that are just, okay, the football team has not been good, the stadium stuff is not moving, and the perception is poor, which is connected to the play on the field. But there are public relations ways that you can help massage that I don't think have been there. So I think a lot of that goes on to Kevin Warren. So like, I agree with you. I think that stadium stuff take a lot longer than we all kind of assume. And when you got politicians involved, we all know that can move at a glacial pace. But yeah, I don't think that the any improvements that have been made are not really available to the public eye. And, that's a little bit of a problem. And so that's like the way I look at evaluating, this year and a half is you just look at the facts in terms of the football team's progress, the stadium, and kind of the way, look, like the Bears lost on Thanksgiving, and you had Super Bowl winning coaches destroying the franchise on television. You had Ryan Poles' college roommate going off on the head coach. Now you could say that's all on Eberflus, right? But Kevin Warren is part of the president. Like part of that job is like overseeing the way that the public is perceiving your team and your coach and your messaging. Like that's part of it. So that that has to continue to improve, and I don't know if that's improved as much as we all thought it was going to be when he got hired. So yes, there have obviously been some improvements for sure, and there's certain things that are going in the right direction and things that are better than the past, and obviously what was the previous regime. I could say the same thing, Bill, about the Ted Phillips regime. You look at the results in the field, you look at the results for the stadium, you look at the results for the building. And I think that's why my answer is what it is, because it's like you kind of expected there to be more drastic public-facing results after a year and a half than we're seeing right now.
All right. And then last thing for you, let me ask you about kind of Ryan Poles and the press conference and the coaching search. I thought keeping Ryan Poles is the right decision. I think it creates too much instability if you try and do a full regime change around Caleb Williams. That just looks like Justin Fields, 2021, 2022 to me, and that to me is very dangerous. So I'm okay with the decision. I do think the resume is spotty. Obviously, the Carolina Panthers trade is one you can't overlook. But, you got Chase Claypool, you've got Nate Davis. So there's some misses there as well. But, you've got hits like Montez Sweat as well. So, I think the resume overall for Poles is pretty good. I know the Eberflus hiring is a little weird, with however that exactly went down. No one seems to have an exact straight answer there. But it certainly wasn't an exhaustive search from Ryan Poles to land on Matt Eberflus. We know that much. They were hired, I think, 2 days apart. But, the press conference, it was kind of odd with Kevin Warren kind of dominating the microphone there and Ryan Poles kind of looking at his shoes for the most part. I know he's never really had to fire someone. That's not an easy thing to do and talk about that. But kind of where are you with Ryan Poles at this point in his tenure? And where are you with the coaching search with a Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren partnership, where a team president who's not from football operations, but, at the same time, very different from Ted Phillips, is clearly going to be involved in this coaching search as well?
Yeah, I kind of answer the question similar to the way I answered the Kevin Warren question, which I do try to look at like the facts and like the product in the field under Ryan Poles' leadership is not there. And he is responsible for the players in the field. You mentioned Matt Eberflus. The other thing we have to remember about Ryan Poles is he was very, very involved in the offensive coordinator search that resulted in Shane Waldron. And if you want to talk about the way this season fell apart, I mean, you could absolutely point to the Shane Waldron hiring as being the beginning. If they had hired somebody else instead, we probably wouldn't be having some of these conversations. And Poles, you saw the way he took to that question yesterday. So you have that element of it. The other thing is too, Bill, and like you've got Caleb Williams, Roma Dunze, Darnell Wright, Cole Kmet, who I know he didn't acquire, but he extended, DJ Moore on offense. And those are guys who I believe are 20. I think GJ might be 27, but the other guys are 25 and younger. Okay. On the other side, you got Montez Sweat. I still think Javon Dexter, there's still some hope there in what he could be. Kyler Gordon, I think, is a phenomenal player when healthy. Jalen Johnson, he didn't acquire, but he extended and recognized this was a Pro Bowl talent. It's unfortunate what's gone on with Jaquan Brisker, but you have like the talent of guys on rookie deals or with years remaining on their contracts that he's brought in, I think you have to acknowledge that when you're evaluating him. And they have a second round pick from Carolina. And I'm pretty sure, and you can correct me on this, I think they have a pretty healthy cap situation.
Yeah, I think
for
about
next
80
year,
million next year to spend.
Right. So they're in like, to go back to the beginning of our conversation, Bill, like the idea that this Bears team's a little different than the other teams that have fired their coaches, that this team's actually good. Ryan Poles has a lot to do with that. So I agree with you that I think it was the right decision to keep him. As far as how the search is going to go, I think if you think about Kevin Warren, almost like if you think about him as like the owner as opposed to the president, I wonder if that changes your perception of the search. Because essentially Kevin Warren is going to be like other teams that have hands-on owners, the owner would be overseeing it with the general manager. Like you would never, I mean, yes, GMs like run searches, but ultimately the owner has to make the final call, oftentimes. So now I just feel like George is kind of allowing Kevin to really spearhead this. So I don't know how different that would be from other teams. Like here's the problem the Bears have is if they really want somebody who wants personnel control, like you have to leave that option open. What if somebody wants to bring in their own GM? Like you have to like be open to a lot of things. So I think it's a difficult spot for Ryan Poles, obviously, to go into this because the fact of the matter is whoever the head coach is, like GMs don't get to pick 3 head coaches usually. I think Tom Telesco did. And maybe Steve Kine. Like you don't have a whole lot of examples. Ryan Pace surprisingly got pretty close to getting to hire a third coach. So Ryan Poles knows that. So whoever they hire, if that coach doesn't work out, it's not going to be Kevin Warren who gets fired, right? So I think it's going to be very interesting. I wrote this that went up on Monday. My hope is that you're not going to get these outside consultants or committee. Like these 2 guys have more than enough connections. Kevin Warren, as you say, he's not a football guy, but he's been in football for a very long time. He knows a lot of people. This is an opportunity for him to flex his muscles. This is an opportunity for him to say, hey, you hired me, yes, to get you a stadium, but this is a moment where I can flex. I can show you how connected I am and how powerful I am by helping land the right head coach. So I think it is, we'll see if that's ultimately productive for the search, but it is a unique situation that it's not just the GM, but you have a very hands-on president. And look, Bears fans wanted that to an extent, right? Bears fans were so done with Ted Phillips. They wanted a president with experience in football. Now, Kevin Warren's not maybe, the football, he wasn't a GM and he wasn't a player, so it's a little different, but this is the hands-on that people wanted. So we'll see how it works. But yeah, it was an interesting contrast to watch yesterday. And boy, would I love to be invited in those conversations the two of them are having daily about their head coaching their head coaching search. But I don't think they're going to invite me.
Yeah, probably not. All right, I did want to ask you one other thing. You can just give me like a 5-10 second answer. If the Bears land on Ben Johnson, someone like that, knowing they still have to pay Eberflus 2 years of his contract, if Ben Johnson wants 10, 12, $million, 13, 14, whatever it might be, $1 million a year, do you think money is no object for this franchise, or do you still think it would play a part?
I think it still plays a role. I will say this to you, Bill, to use something you brought up earlier. You mentioned that there have been a lot of changes in the front office as far as executive vice presidents who have been added. How many of those have we seen added or promoted to that level in the past year? Like 8, 6
Something
to 8?
like that, yeah.
Those are big salaries. Those are big salaries the Bears have never had to carry. How many different consultants is this team paying to oversee how many different stadium sites right now? How much money are they spending every single day on Arlington Heights, on land that they now own? There's a lot of money that's coming out of that building. Now, I don't know if that means that they're more willing to spend up for somebody like that, or they're like, no, we need to save because we have to spend on all this stuff. I don't know. But I use that as an example to say, like, I don't know, maybe the organization is looking at the financial stuff a little differently than it stereotypically is. But I also acknowledge that the money I was alluding to is not of the 12 to 15 million realm. I don't think that's a good answer, Bill, but I do like to remind, like, all you have to do is go to the Bears front office page and you can see like the new people in the new positions. And like those aren't $80,000 a year jobs.
Right.
And those are brand new jobs that were created. So, it's just something to kind of keep in mind. And you can take that whichever way you want. But those are all public. Those are all public announcements of those jobs. I'm not giving away state secrets. Everybody knows that this is an organization that's been spending money maybe a little differently. So how that will impact who they hired head coach. I'll say this, obviously, Bill, you would hope that money is not going to get in the way of hiring the guy that they want. But, look, what is the one thing I know you wanted a 5-10 second answer. I'm rambling a little bit, but Ryan Poles always says this about free agency, right? Like he never seems to go like over whatever his price is.
Right.
Guys, we rarely we rarely have seen that, especially when the Bears are like in it with somebody who they want. So will that be a factor in the coaching search? I don't know, but it'll be very, very, very interesting because it's obviously been the biggest stereotype about this team is the way they spend on coaches, and historically they wouldn't go spend for a Ben Johnson or whatever it's going to cost for Bill Belichick or a Mike Vrabel. We'll see if that changes.
Yep. Yes, we will. It's going to be a fascinating couple months here. Well, there he is, Kevin Fishbain from The Athletic. Kevin, great information, great conversation. Thanks so much for so much time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you, Bill.
All right. There he is, Kevin Fishbain. Good, nice, lengthy conversation with Kevin. Went longer than I expected, but Kevin was given great content, great information there, and good opinions, because this is the wild, wild west. We are entering this. We have never been here. Media fans, we don't know what to expect. So should be interesting to see what the Bears do next. But I'll tell you what you can expect. You can expect a good time if you play Underdog Fantasy. That's right. Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion with a B dollars won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players by just selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog Fantasy. Now, for me, I like to play on the app, and I like to play Red Zone Rush. Red Zone Rush is a game you don't find it anywhere else other than Underdog Fantasy. You just swipe left, swipe right, deciding if a player is going to score a touchdown. yes or no. And if you do play, you're automatically boosted, get a 51% profit boost when you play. That's the one I like to play the most. But they've got, vulture protection, a designated running back to score in your pick'em entry. If they get vultured, your entry can be rescued. Plenty of different aspects and plenty of different ways to play on Underdog Fantasy. It's available in 33 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And we've got to tell you about the promo code CITY, CITY. That's the Second City Gridiron promo code. You use that, sign up with Underdog Fantasy today, download the app, and use that promo code CITY, CITY. You're going to get $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Now, if you're going to play Underdog Fantasy, you got to be 18 or over, 19 or over in Alabama and Nebraska, and 19 or over in Colorado for some of the games, 21 or over in Massachusetts and Arizona. You got to be present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. And if you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or you can visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, it's 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783. You can text Next Step to 53342. In New York, you can call the 24/7 Hope line at 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Excuse me. Underdog Fantasy. Very happy to have them a partner here on Second City Gridiron. I drink some water here. Got a tickle in my throat. All right, let's dive into the mailbag. We've already gone a really far, long time here on this podcast. But hey, it's a big week. Matt Eberflus gets fired, so we gotta dive in here. So let's jump in here. And we'll get some of these are going to duplicate, but we're going to dive into as many of these as possible and see where we can get. Sam Householder, our buddy at Windy City Gridiron. More important for next head coach, experience or scheme? For me, Sam, it is scheme. How are you going to improve Caleb Williams? How are you going to make sure he is the franchise quarterback we all need? Experience doesn't matter to me. Sean McVay, no experience. Matt LaFleur, no experience. Kevin O'Connell, no experience. Mike Tomlin, no experience. John Harbaugh, no experience. See, we got a theme here. Yes, Andy Reid was fired from the Eagles, goes on to great things with the Chiefs. There are retread coaches that do well, but so many of the best coaches in the league are first-time hires. You just have to make sure it is the right hire. Adrian says, do you think the Bears will be willing to pay what Ben Johnson would want if he is the top candidate for the Bears? We've heard rumors of coaches being brought in with some standard operations. Do you think this changes? David Cromwell, same kind of thing. Do you think the Bears will be hesitant to hand out big money to their new head coach? Or do we think things might be different this time involved with Kevin Warren now involved? I am going to hope, I don't know for certain, I am going to hope that things are changing. You heard Kevin Fishbain talk about it. They are spending a lot of money. And while you can sit there and say, well, they're spending a lot of money, so they're not going to spend money on the head coach, that's broken mentality. If they're willing to spend on all these other things, even if it's the Bears, you have to make the logical jump that they are also willing to spend on the head coach. They have fired Matt Eberflus in season. They've got to pay him to 39 games more to coach that he is not going to coach. So the Bears are spending money. So, I always have said, until I start seeing change, I'm going to assume everything is going to be the way it's always been. But we're seeing change. And the firing of Matt Eberflus in season certainly is a big change to how this team is operated. And I think because of that, you can make an assumption that they will be willing to spend on the coach that they land on to make sure they get that contract done. All right. Amun Joy. Would the Bears consider giving up draft picks in exchange for ideal coaches? Brings up Parcells, Payton, and Gruden as coaches who have been traded in the past. So would they trade for someone like McDaniels or Shanahan? Not advocating for it, just is that a viable option? McDaniels, Josh McDaniels, no. There. If you're talking about like Mike McDaniel, no, not either. Look, there are certain coaches. If Sean McVay wanted to get traded to the Bears, I would talk about giving up draft picks. I've heard like Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings are not trading in their coach in the division, so their coach can torture them 2 games a year. That's not going to happen. You're talking about a very select handful of guys where that would actually be worth doing it. It might just be one. You might only be able to tell me Sean McVay. Am I going to trade for Kevin Stefanski? No, I don't think I'm going to be trading Kevin Stefanski unless you're telling me it's a 4th-round pick. But the Browns wouldn't give up their coach for a 4th-round pick. You got to look at it from both sides of the table. So I'd consider it for Sean McVay. You brought up Kyle Shanahan. I don't think that's a viable option, but I would consider it for Kyle Shanahan. I'm just going to assume that is not something that's going to happen. But Sean McVay, it's been rumbling the last couple of years that he's kind of done in LA, whether he wants to go to TV for a couple of years or just get a change of location, fresh start. That's definitely something that's been going on with McVay. So that is the one guy I would trade for. But beyond that, I'm just not certain there's anyone else I would do. All right, bear down. Can you review previous interim coaches that became head coaches and compare and contrast? Hear a lot of Antonio Pierce, nothing more than recency bias, more like Arian's Kitchens for me. All right, well, if you look at interims, like for the most part, if we're just being honest, interim coaches don't go anywhere. I'll rip through names here. You tell me if you're like, oh, that was a great head coach. Dick LeBeau, Dave McGinnis, Gary Moeller, Terry Robisky, Mike Tice, Wade Phillips, Jim Bates, Terry Robisky, Dick Duran, Emmett Thomas, Jim Haslett, Tom Cable, Mike Singletary, Perry Fuel, Jason Garrett was the interim in Dallas, took over for Wade Phillips and then coached there for a very long time, but most people didn't like him. Leslie Frazier, same thing, got very criticized for his job as the Vikings head coach. Eric Studesville, Jim Tomsula, disaster, Mel Tucker, Todd Bowles, Romeo Crennel, Aaron Cromer, Wade Phillips, Tony Sperano, Dan Campbell, not with the Lions, didn't get it with the did it with the Dolphins and then didn't get it. Mike Mularkey, Pat Shermer, John Fossil, Doug Marrone, not with Buffalo, Anthony Lynn, Steve Spagnola, Greg Williams, Joe Philbin, Bill Callahan, Perry Fuel, Romeo Crennel, Raheem Morris, Darrell Bevel, Rich Basilla, I don't remember exactly how to pronounce that. Darrell Bevel again, Steve Wilkes, Jeff Saturday, complete disaster. Jerry Rosberg, Antonio Pierce, Chris Tabor, Jeff Smith, Jeff Ulbrich, Darren Rizzi, and Thomas Brown. That is not a list that is going to inspire confidence in terms of making sure an interim head coach becomes a great head coach. Lights, Kamara, action. What has Kevin Warren done on football ops in his career to give fans faith he can be a key member in getting this coaching hire right? Again, you want to balance Kevin Warren's knowledge with Ryan Poles' knowledge. Ryan Poles is the football ops guy. He's going to make sure this coach knows how things need to be run day to day, his offensive scheme, who he wants to bring in as coaches. That's where Ryan Poles is going to be. Kevin Warren has seen how good organizations operate. Super Bowl champion Rams. The Vikings win pretty much every year. He was there for 15 years. Kevin Warren has been around football for a long time, has a lot of contacts. He's going to be able to talk to people. What do you think of this guy? What do you think of that guy? He's going to be able to get honest assessments out of it. He's going to know, how did Dick Vermeil operate in there in with the Rams, right? Versus Mike Martz. How did they operate? What was good? What was bad? The Vikings coaches that worked well, how did they operate in there? The ones that didn't work as well, how did they operate? He's going to bring a different aspect of knowledge. So like everyone's worried about, well, what does he know about football? He knows about good organizations and how good organizations should be run and how that head coach is incorporated within that organization. So he's going to bring a different aspect of it to the Chicago Bears. Again, he doesn't need to know exactly what Ben Johnson wants to do with his red zone offense. That's Ryan Poles' job. That's not Kevin Warren's job. So they different aspects of the coaching hire. Clayton Connis, Regardless of what happens in weeks 14 through 17, if the Bears beat the Packers in week 18, do you think there is any chance Jordan McCaskey lets Kevin and Ryan hire anyone not named Thomas Brown? Yes, 100%. George McCaskey, his job is just to nod when Kevin Warren tells him what to do. George isn't making decisions. You should have seen that when George was hiding in the corner on the press conference on Monday. It's Kevin Warren's team, folks. This is Kevin Warren's football team. Hairless Yoda. Mr. Zimmerman, are we to honestly believe that Ryan Poles will have the final say during this head coaching hiring cycle? Seems between the comments from Cap on ESPN 1000 concerning the Eberflus hiring and firing, Poles' frustrated appearance during the press conference, his hands are being tied. I don't think Poles' hands are being tied, and maybe this is a good time to talk about the hiring of Matt Eberflus. All right? Now, Ryan Poles has made mistakes, and you heard Kevin Fishbain. He was very involved in the Shane Waldron hire. So I'm not trying to sit there and say that that Ryan Poles doesn't make mistakes. But saddling Ryan Poles with Matt Eberflus and all the decisions to keep Matt Eberflus is a bit of a stretch to me. The Bears did an exhaustive search for the head coach for weeks. They brought in multiple candidates. They did it concurrently with the general manager. They settle on Ryan Poles. They hire Ryan Poles. 2 days later, Matt Eberflus is hired. Do you think that Ryan Poles, either just because it's contractually that he gets to sign off, that he hires coaches, that he rubber stamped and signed off on Matt Eberflus, or at the most said, here's Dan Quinn, Jim Caldwell, and Matt Eberflus, pick one? He did not get an opportunity to do an exhaustive search. So don't even put the original hire on Ryan Poles. At most, he picked from a short list. At least he was told who his coach was going to be when taking the job. Arranged marriage. Never a good idea. Fast forward 2 years later, Eberflus stinks against the Packers. The Bears go 7-10. Everybody wants Eberflus fired, except the Bears don't fire Matt Eberflus. Now, Ryan Poles publicly is saying, I love Matt Eberflus. You don't know how good this guy is. Maybe that's what he believes. Or maybe he knows that ownership was not ready to pull the plug on Matt Eberflus after seeing him go from 3 wins in a rebuild to 7 wins despite not having the quarterback. And now he's getting a hotshot rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams. And it may have been, we're not eating 3 years of Matt Eberflus's contract because you guys want to pivot. So we don't know exactly what happened. And I have heard it from both sides that Ryan Poles loves him or that Ryan Poles was lukewarm on him and that George McCaskey was not ready to move on from Matt Eberflus. But things have changed. And if it was George McCaskey, the fact that 10 games later or 12 games later, he was fired shows that George is willing to say, okay, you guys are running this ship. So things have changed. And I do believe that. So I don't think, it has, anything to do with Ryan Poles in terms of what he can and can't do. But Kevin Warren is going to have his hand in the cookie jar. That's 100% going to be the case here. They're going to run this concurrently. But Ryan Poles, I do think, is going to be able to have significant say in what's going on here. I don't think Kevin Warren's just going to hire whoever he wants. Ryan Poles be damned. I don't think that's going to happen. I know a lot of wild stuff being said about Kevin Warren. And you heard it from Kevin Fishbain, where he says, well, he's done a lot to improve things behind the scenes, but publicly the image still sucks. Well, I think the image still sucks because of Matt Eberflus. So did Kevin Warren really want him back? I've heard that was a little, So I don't think that's the case. So the question is, why does the Bears' perception stink? The Bears' perception stinks because of the product on the field. If 1 year from now, the Bears aren't 4-8, the Bears are 8-4 or 9-3, and their new coach is awesome, and they're headed towards the playoffs, it's going to be like, hey, the Bears are finally on the right track with Caleb Williams and their new coach. So perception takes a lot longer to change in a year and a half as well. All right, let's go to Ben. You think they would shell out the money for a big name like Ben Johnson? I think they will. We'll have to see. Maybe there's some bonuses in there for Ben Johnson. Maybe it's, you get $10 million base and you can have some reachable parameters to get significant bonuses. I think they can come up with something, Ben, that will work. Cody McBanks, what kind of offense does Ben Johnson run? I know it's his own, which I love, but how would you categorize it? What are the tendencies? Who are the defenses that do the best against it? Who do you think he could pull from his staff, and where would that come from? All right, Cody. I mean, I am not a grind the tape guy to tell you exactly what the scheme is, but here's what I can tell you. Blocking is, and it sounds stupid to say this, blocking is critical for this scheme. He needs, he likes an aggressive offensive line, and he likes wide receivers who are willing to get dirty and make blocks, like a Rome Odunze, you know, Equinami St. Brown, like that type of guy. You know, he can't catch, but he could block. Rome Odunze is willing to block. Like, that's the kind of guys you need. He likes crisp routes. So DJ Moore, you're going to, you know, if Ben Johnson's here, you're going to have to get your head out of your ass. I'm not saying it's firmly in there, but DJ is not a crisp route runner. He's going to have to change the way he operates a little bit in a Ben Johnson offense. He likes 12 personnel, likes to use the second tight end. Does he have that option here in Chicago? Well, Gerald Everett kind of stinks. Maybe Ben Johnson can get more out of him if he's back next year. Maybe they go and try and find a second tight end. So it's very much how the run game and pass game operate together, getting things out quickly, scheming guys open short, which eventually will set up the intermediate and the deep games. That's why you see Jared Goff with 80% completion percentages, because he keeps getting those quick hitters. And then when the big opportunities are there, he's not missing them. So that's what you want. You don't want a lot of pressure. He's able to avoid that. And you can sit there and be like, oh, so that's it. He just needs to have great blocking. But that's something he's built together. He's built it with the offensive line coach, Hank Fraley, who I would hope, if Ben Johnson is hired as the head coach, that he wants to get Hank Fraley with him, a big promotion there in terms of maybe offensive coordinator, run game coordinator kind of thing, where he's an offensive coordinator who's not calling the plays because Ben Johnson is still calling the plays. And that's a way to get that offensive line, offensive coordinator, all kind of together on the same page. In terms of who he can build beyond that, I'm not really certain. I haven't done a dive that deep yet, and I'm not going to do a dive that deep until we kind of start getting closer to where maybe Ben Johnson is an actual solution. But, you know, I think that's the best way I can talk about the scheme. But again, it's very much in terms of making the run game and the pass game work together. And what that does is that creates a rhythm for the offense. That running game gets the offensive line in rhythm. We talk about it all the time. You need a run game to get your offensive line in rhythm. Offensive lines don't get in rhythm in pass blocking. They get it in the run game. You get them set up in there, mix with the passing game, get the whole offense in rhythm. And that's where his rhythmic play calling is so impressive, where you hear people who are watching Ben Johnson's games, full games, are just impressed with how, you know, it's not predictive. He doesn't sit there and be like, this is our scheme, this is what we do. He adjusts week to week based on what defensive tendencies are. It's a very unique scheme. I really, truly think it's his. And that's why I think if they can get him, he's the right way to go. All right, we've got a few more to get to. Let's see how many we can rip through here as this podcast is getting to immense lengths here. I think we're at 90 minutes. Kurt, is it too early to assume the head coach search is going to come down to Thomas Brown and Ben Johnson? They're going to be at the top of the list, but the Bears are going to interview 7, 8, 9 guys, especially the fact that Eberflus is gone early. They can get a jump on this. They are going to do an exhaustive search, Kurt. So no, wait. Yeah, it's definitely way too early that it's down to those two guys. Alan Campbell, Mike Tomlin vibes from Thomas Brown. That's certainly what a lot of people have said. I think it's an easy dot to connect there, but they definitely are their own people, defensive and offensive mind. But Thomas Brown has that accountability, you know, hard nosed, doesn't take crap from anyone kind of head coach mentality that a lot of people like to see with their NFL coach. Joe Tucio, do you think Poles and Warren will have sole responsibility for hiring the next head coach, or will they use another committee? I don't think they're going to use a committee. That's why Kevin Warren's here. That's why Ryan Poles is here. They use the committee when Ted Phillips and George McCaskey don't know what the hell they're doing and they don't have a GM. They didn't use a committee for Matt Nagy. That was a Ryan Pace special. I don't expect them to use a committee here. What else do we got? Which up-and-coming special teams coach is ready to make the leap to head coach? I honestly, Sir Guy Grand, I don't know. I'm not worried about it either. Not for the Bears. Bears need an offensive coach. Billy Kidd, do you think McCaskey will give Warren and Poles a blank check to hire their best choice at head coach? I ask this because the Bears have been historically cheap in the past. If not, how do they stop being a dysfunctional organization? They stop being a dysfunctional organization like running like a significant billion-dollar corporation, because that's what they are. They're not a mom and pop shop. They are a billion-dollar corporation who should not, $70 million for a head coach should not be a big deal. So do I think it'll be a blank check? No. Do I think it would be a significant amount of money the Bears are willing to spend? Yes. Ed Helinsky. How about Rex Ryan as Bears head coach? C, no. Yes, no, maybe so. Or does he come with too much baggage? Rex Ryan, no. No interest, zero interest there, Ed. Offensive mind for me, Rex Ryan. Honestly, I think that would be a disaster. I disagree, but I think that'd be one of the worst ideas the Bears have ever had. Ryan Schlanzer, Bears should have the most coveted job in the market, thanks in large part to Caleb Williams. Is it fair to assume they'll be the first domino to fall? You can't think they'd be the first domino to fall because of the fact that if it's Ben Johnson and Ben Johnson's going to be coaching possibly all the way to the Super Bowl. I know they've got the new rules and how all that's changed a little bit, but no, I do not think the Bears will be the first domino to fall. I think the Bears will be exhaustive, and they're going to back channel this and see just how close they can get with Ben Johnson before they really start the interview process. Betsy Tarr, Kevin Warren should be involved, but it sounds like Poles gave off vibes he's being undercut, given that Kevin Warren wanted Flus gone and he trusted Poles, and Poles was wrong. Is he going to be hovering over Poles? Will top head coach candidates be turned off by this dynamic? Betsy, I think you're making way too many conclusions about a press conference and what a couple rumbles have been on the internet that haven't been substantiated by a lot of different people. Now, I know there's been some tension there, and Kaplan has talked about it, and Kevin Warren's involved, but people wanted the president involved, and now the president is involved. I do not think Ryan Poles is being undercut, but I do think Kevin Warren has made it clear that he is going to be involved in all aspects of this team, which I'm okay with, because that's how I think a team president should handle things. I don't think Ryan Poles was this. He was the Matt Eberflus guy, and Kevin Warren was not the Matt Eberflus guy. If people are telling you that, I don't think that's accurate. There are a lot of different layers to that conversation, including 3 years left on Matt Eberflus's deal. Armando Kakash, if Shanahan becomes available, would he be at the top of the list? If Kyle Shanahan is fired, yes, he would be right at the top of the list. That answers everyone's problems. An experienced head coach who has gotten to the Super Bowl and is an offensive mind. So that checks a lot of boxes. If that's the direction you want to go, I certainly would not have a problem with Kyle Shanahan, but I do not expect Kyle Shanahan to become available. And on that note, let's talk about Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, because they are up next with the Bears. I think this is an interesting game. Obviously, the fired coach bounce, you're expecting something there. The 49ers are a mess. I'm just going to say it. Everything points to the Chicago Bears winning this football game. The 49ers are falling apart. They're 5-7. They're not winning football games. Christian McCaffrey's out for the year. Nick Bosa, who knows what's going on? Trent Williams maybe plays, maybe doesn't. Brock Purdy's banged up. They've got injuries to their skill positions. 49ers are a mess. Just one of those seasons. The Bears just fired their coach. Players are fired up. This is it. This is where they turn it around. They go into San Francisco and win. I think it's a close game. I think it's a competitive game. But I think it's still asking a lot for the Chicago Bears to beat the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to say the Bears lose this one 27-24. I think Caleb Williams and Thomas Brown, again, look pretty good together. Don't get it done quite enough. I don't expect some egregious screw up by the coaching staff. I just think they're going to come up a little short against a team that still has a lot of talent and is still pretty well coached. So we'll see about it next week. We'll talk about it next week. What a wild week it was at Hallis Hall. Matt Eberflus is no longer the coach of the Chicago Bears. Bear down, everybody. We'll talk to you next week. Adios.